Baie dankie, Louis. And good morning to everyone attending this conference here today. Very glad to see that many of you decided to come gain more insights regarding these important issues that if you were to turn on the television or turn on the radio, you would almost certainly hear aspects of the land debate. It's almost a universal topic here in South Africa, and it's not going away. It's going to be part of the national discussion or the groot oop gesprek, the large open discussion for a long time to come. But I firstly just want to thank everyone in attendance here today, my colleagues, also concerned citizens, as Louis pointed out. We also have representatives here from many different civil society organizations, and we also have representatives here from the United States Embassy in South Africa and also the Netherlands Embassy in South Africa. So thank you very much for your concern and also for taking the effort to see what AfriForum is publishing here today. If you were to listen to many of these debates on land in South Africa, it's almost certain that you're going to encounter the claim that 72% of land in South Africa is in the hands of the white minority. You saw this morning in one of the clips our then Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola, stating that 72% of land in South Africa is owned by the white minority, and he says it with conviction. He says it with a lot of certainty in his voice. How can he be wrong if he sounds so certain? Well, the fact is he is wrong. He's not citing a true fact. He's citing actually a quite deeply flawed fact, and hopefully AfriForum can demonstrate here today on why it is so deeply flawed. But it forms part of a bigger pattern. And the bigger pattern that it forms part of is one where many such claims are made in South Africa, not just about land, but many other subjects with a very strong sense of self-assuredness when it comes to the facts. But then when you actually dig into these claims, you realize they're not as true as the speaker made them sound. Many facts that are cited in South Africa, the discourse in South Africa by prominent politicians, are only as strong as people make them sound rather than the substance of these facts. And one of these claims that is only as strong as the confidence of the speaker is the claim that 72% of the land in South Africa is in the hands of the white minority. And when you start digging into this claim, it starts becoming clear that significant questions regarding many of these claims have been asked for a long time. It's not a claim that has gone unquestioned for many years. It's just that the critiques of this claim have been ignored to a large part by many people that should know better. Parliament themselves acknowledge that, and I quote, "There is a need for a credible land audit because the current stats on land ownership are not trustworthy." And they said this in 2025. But what stats are they talking about? They're talking about the 2017 Land Audit Report, which is the origin of this false claim of 72%. This Land Audit Report has been cited all the way now to 2026, almost more than a decade later, or just under a decade later, and it's still being cited as an authoritative source on these types of matters, even though it very clearly is not, as will be demonstrated today. Firstly, it should be noted that there are major inconsistencies and multiple numerical errors when it comes to this report. If you look into some of these discrepancies, some of them amount to hundreds of thousands or even millions of hectares when it comes to the errors that this report makes in regards to land statistics. Furthermore, this 2017 land audit used different methods to calculate land ownership, which led to a lot of confusion and also made a lot of its conclusions contradictory. And it made a lot of its results difficult to understand. When you start really looking into how this land audit report got to many of its conclusions, you'll start realizing that it actually just made an educated guess. The South African government, for example, continues to use apartheid-era racial categories such as white, colored, and Indian to categorize the different population groups of South Africa, but not a lot of people know that these categories don't actually have a legal definition. None of these categories you can define within the South African law. But what that means is that when the South African government uses these categories that they just copy and pasted from the previous apartheid administration, they are making an argument of you'll know it when you see it. That is how they apply these racial categories. But despite this fact that there's no legal definition for any of these racial categories, if you were to self-classify yourself as the wrong category, you can be prosecuted for fraud in South Africa. How that is determined, it is determined that you are lying about your race, well, there hasn't been a legal case to test that. It's all just been on a you'll know it when you see it basis that it has been applied. The 2017 land audit uses these categorizations as well, and it uses to determine how it categorizes people into these different boxes. It uses a method of fragmented sources to determine people's race and the race of landowners. Where no direct racial information could be matched or determined, which is something that happened quite a lot in the setting up or in the research for that land audit, it dubiously relied on just looking at the names of people to determine the race of a landowner. Yes, you heard that right. The report looked at someone's name and said, this name sounds black, therefore this is a black landowner, and this is how it will be registered in this report. Or this name sounds white, therefore this must be a white landowner. That is literally a significant part of the 2017 land audit's methodology to determine race of landowners in South Africa. But this is an error, or not an error, but this is a flaw within the land report that is not mentioned when the conclusions that the land report comes to, or the audit comes to, are cited. They're cited as if this was some scientific study that was made that's bulletproof and watertight and was following the scientific method. But then when you start looking into how it determined a lot of its racial statistics, it relied on something as this name sounds black or this name sounds white. Notably, the government was also already conscious of this limitation, the limitation that you can't really determine the race of all landowners in South Africa, all the way back in 2014, when the South African government determined that a full picture of the land ownership in South Africa is not realistically obtainable. So they knew what they were doing. They knew they couldn't get to a real land ownership calculated land ownership numbers at the end of the day, but they tried it anyway through, as I said, an educated guess. Also, another flaw within the 2017 land audit is what is omitted, not what is included. The land audit's racial ownership analysis covers only a limited portion of South Africa's land surface area, only about 30%, or just under 1/3. And that is of South Africa's total 122 million hectares that was racially profiled by the report, or I should rather say attempted to be racially profiled by the report. And questionably at that, as I mentioned earlier. Additionally, the audit failed to acknowledge that many forms of land occupation, use and control in South Africa exist outside of formal land administration systems and are therefore difficult to measure through conventional land ownership records alone, meaning that the data set is very, very incomplete. Large ownership categories were completely ignored and just excluded from its land ownership calculations. For example, trusts, companies, and community-based organizations when it comes to land ownership. And these were just completely excluded because they, as the land audit states, cannot be racially classified. So here's another flaw that needs to be acknowledged. When that audit tried to determine who owns the land in South Africa, it just took massive categories like trusts and companies and ignored them. Said we can't racially classify according to these categories, so we're just going to not make them part of the calculation. And what was the result of this? This means that nearly half of all land registered to private owners in South Africa was not assigned a racial category within this audit, and therefore excluded from the audit's racial calculations. It should further be noted how flawed this methodology is when you take into account that specifically land ownership in black hands in South Africa is often disproportionately community-owned and communally owned, and then you look at this audit and it's completely just ignoring community-owned land, but it's trying to make claims about racial land ownership in South Africa. It's just a recipe for disaster. You're not going to get a conclusive answer. You're going to get a thumbsuck answer. Additionally to that, just to further demonstrate how ridiculous that methodology is, for example, by 2024, 1,700 communal property associations owned about twice the area of farm and agricultural holdings that was registered to individual landowners in 2015, individual black landowners in 2015. So a very large portion of South African land, especially agricultural land, is communally owned, but the audit didn't care. One prominent example of collectively owned land that is administered collectively is the Inkonyama Trust, which covers approximately 2.8 million hectares, or about 1/3 or 30% of the KwaZulu-Natal province. And it is home to several million residents who are almost exclusively black South Africans. The land is held in trust for traditional communities living under customary tenure arrangements. The Inkonyama Trust was not taken into account when the 2017 land audit made its calculations regarding land ownership in South Africa. Once again, a fact that's not mentioned. Another prominent example of a category that was excluded was trusts. President Cyril Ramaphosa's large 4,500 hectare Phala Phala estate that's now become infamous is a high-profile example of a private piece of land in black ownership that was just completely excluded from the 2017 land audit because it's in the hands of a trust and it can't reliably calculate what the race of a trust owner, or the trust can't have a race, so they just ignored it completely in their calculations. And then lastly, state ownership of land. The state in South Africa is the largest single landowner in South Africa, but it was also excluded when it comes to the racial calculations of land ownership in South Africa, because the state technically can't be given a race. So the state ownership of land in South Africa comes down to approximately 23% of South Africa's total surface area. That was just excluded from the racial calculations of the land audit. That's still being referenced today in 2026 with authority. After taking all these gaps into account, the total amount of land in South Africa not racially profiled by the 2017 land audit comes down to 68%. That's a supermajority of South Africa's land just completely ignored by the land audit when it came to its racial conclusions. But rather than being responsible, especially politically responsible, when it comes to not worsening racial tensions or inflaming racial tensions, rather than being responsible, the government pushed ahead and still made what it framed as authoritative statements about land ownership based on race in South Africa, even though the audit or the report that they relied on ignores 68% of the land in South Africa. And as it had now been established, the racial breakdown of the 2017 land audit applies only to a very limited amount of land in South Africa. So what then about the 72% claim? This frequently repeated 72% claim. The fact remains that it's based, even if you take the land audit, you ignore all of the flaws within the land audit, and you just take the numbers that you find within it at face value as this is the state of affairs, the 72% still doesn't make sense. No, it's not 72% of all land as politicians frame it. It's not even 72% of all agricultural land in South Africa. It's 72% that refers specifically to individually owned farms and agricultural holdings that could be racially classified, which was a tiny, tiny amount. And if you take this into account within the bigger picture, even if the land audit has no flaws and it's perfectly executed, that means that white South Africans still only own 21% of land in South Africa. But that's ignoring all of the flaws that I've outlined today. That's in comparison to the state, who is the largest landowner in South Africa, which, if you take the estimates into account of how much land the government owns in South Africa, that comes down to about 25 to 28 million hectares, or about the quarter of the surface area of South Africa. Then also added to that, the 25 to 28 million hectares the state currently owns, to just put it into perspective, that is the size of the provinces of Northwest, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, and Gauteng combined in the hands of the state. And then you also have another 8.3 million hectares that are unaccounted for. We don't know who owns it. But according to most experts, this will probably be in the state's hands as well. Meaning that the amount of land owned by the state in South Africa then rises to about 30% of all land in South Africa. Another major thing that was completely ignored by the land audit of 2017 was agricultural potential. And agricultural potential absolutely matters when it comes to land in South Africa. Because, and I don't think a lot of people know this, might be the first time some people are hearing this, only 26.4% of South Africa's land is considered arable. The rest is not considered arable. Arability means how suitable is land for crops. Only 26%. Highly arable land has strong farming potential, while low or non-arable land has limited or no crop potential. And now to put that even more into perspective, the Free State has the largest share of highly arable land. What do you think that percentage is? It's the most fertile province according to the statistics when it comes to arable land. Only 6.2% of the Free State is highly arable land. The second province with the most highly arable land is Limpopo. How much do you think that is? 4.3%. Northwest and Mpumalanga, 3.7% each, and KwaZulu-Natal, 3.5%. The Northern Cape has virtually no highly arable land. Notably, an estimated 43% of individually owned white rural land is located in the Northern Cape. That's a very important point. But the province has almost no arable land because it's very dry. It's a desert. In fact, a significant majority of white-owned farmland is located in the arid, desert, or semi-desert areas of South Africa. It's another fact that is very conveniently left out. Even though 0% of the country's 26% arable land is located in the Northern Cape, the province by far accounts for the largest share of South Africa's land classified under commercial agriculture, about 37%. The province with the second largest amount of commercial agricultural land is the Free State, with 16.4%. This is because the Northern Cape's agricultural land is very low, when it has very low carrying capacity per hectare when it comes to grazing. If any of you have visited the Northern Cape, you'll see that it's mostly just sheep farmers that are grazing there. Whereas you need, for example, 8.5 hectares per animal in a province like Gauteng, you need 35 hectares on average per animal in the Northern Cape. The average size of a farm in the Northern Cape is therefore much larger than in other provinces. You pretty much need a farm the size of a small European country in the Northern Cape to raise 10 sheep. But that also skews the percentages of land ownership very strongly. As I said earlier, it's well documented that the majority of white-owned agricultural land is in the desertous or arid or dry areas of South Africa, which includes the Northern Cape. The Northern Cape, as has been established, has no arable land, but it's by far the largest province in terms of area. Covering roughly about 30%, almost a third of South Africa, is the Northern Cape. For perspective, the second largest province in South Africa is the Eastern Cape, with just 13.8% of South Africa's land. The Northern Cape being by far the largest province in South Africa, where most of the very large surface area farms in white hands are located, therefore skews land ownership data considerably. This fact demonstrates how statistics alone are not enough to get the full picture when it comes to South Africa. You have to put these statistics into context. Another piece of important context is rainfall. South Africa is not a very high rainfall country. Only about 2/3 of South Africa experiences rainfall levels that are globally seen as semi or true desert. That's more than 66% of South Africa experiencing rainfall that is pretty much a desert or considered a desert. Only 30% of the country receives more than 500 milliliters of rainfall per year. To put how arid and dry South Africa is into perspective, the true desert areas, such as the Karoo Desert and the Kalahari Desert, cover about 55% of the country's surface. That's more than half of the country are two major deserts. The farming expert Ernst Pringle calculated that by 2013, no less than 80% of black-owned agricultural land was located within the country's high rainfall zones in South Africa, while more than 70% of white-owned agricultural land was in the low rainfall or arid parts of the country. When the land in South Africa is measured according to its agricultural potential, Pringle calculated that by 2013 already, that's more than a decade ago, black South Africans already owned almost half of the country's agricultural potential. This is an important piece of context. It's not just about how much land do you own, it's about what is the value of that land, what can you do with that land, what can you plant and what can you graze on that land. There are pieces of South Africa where you can do none of that. You can't graze anything there and you can't grow anything there. The research of Johan Bormann backs up Pringle's findings. He found that black South Africans own at least 56% of agricultural potential in KwaZulu-Natal, 80% in Mpumalanga, 85% in Limpopo, and 73% in Gauteng. These are the numbers you'll never hear from land-obsessed politicians. And that, speaking of politicians, that brings us to the point of the state's land reform program. Many South African politicians have blamed the willing buyer, willing seller model for many of the problems in South Africa when it comes to the unequal distribution of land. However, the problem is not the willing buyer, willing seller model. It is the fact that the government is an unwilling distributor of the land that it has hoarded for many years under the banner of land reform. For example, since 2009, the government has been reluctant to grant title deeds to beneficiaries of land reform projects, rather giving them 30-year leases and leasing them the land rather than giving them actual title deeds so that they own the land. Notably, it is on record that the South African government has acquired, through their land redistribution program, an amount of land at least double the size of Los Angeles. What has it done with this land? Well, it hasn't redistributed it, it's just hoarded it. And the land that it has redistributed has mostly gone into the hands of those with the right political connections. To give those of you an example of how big Los Angeles is, that's about 2.5 million hectares that the government is hoarding just from land that it acquired under the banner of land redistribution. Politicians also conveniently omit the vast amounts of land that have been acquired without government assistance by black South Africans over the past 3 decades. Pringle notes that a significant amount of land has been taken over by black-owned consortia and corporations since 1994, while partnership agreements between black South Africans with regard to farms have become very common. In the Eastern Cape districts of Komga and Elliot, for example, by 2013 already, it was already estimated that half of the farms in the area had been purchased privately by black South Africans. Furthermore, it is estimated that by 2022, black South Africans had privately acquired a total of 1.78 million hectares of farmland through market transactions, independent of the government and its projects. By 2024, the Bureau of Economic Research at Stellenbosch University estimated that the amount of land acquired by Black South Africans through private transactions had risen to 1.9 million hectares. By 2025, the estimate had risen to 2.4 million hectares. And this is all independent of the government, even though the government wants to create the narrative that land reform or land redistribution can only happen through the mechanism of the state. Another thing that is completely overlooked by a lot of the more extremist voices in the land debate is urbanization. The current land debate is framed as if there's this hunger for agricultural land. Everyone just wants to go farm. Every single South African just wants to have his farm and go farm. But the trends and the statistics paint another picture. In South Africa, a hectare of urban land can be worth tens to hundreds of times more than a hectare of rural land, depending on the location and use. Even the 2017 land audit acknowledges this vast disparity in how land is valued in regards to urban versus rural. However, political rhetoric focuses on agricultural land. Politicians are always talking about farms, agricultural land, the hunger for farmland. According to an Institute of Race Relations analysis of the 2017 land audit, at the time, 2017, Black South Africans already own more urban land than whites in 7 out of the 9 provinces in South Africa. This is before including the massive share of urban land owned by municipalities and state and parastatal bodies, which the land audit also omitted from its racial calculations, as was established earlier. It's also significant to note that approximately 87 of restitution claims, land restitution claims, lodged before the 1998 cutoff date were for urban properties, not rural properties. So when Black South Africans are applying for restitution of land, 87% of those applications and claims are for urban land, not for rural land. South Africa is also a rapidly urbanizing country. The urban population of South Africa has increased from 54% in 1994 to 67% in 2026. And when I mention the land restitution process, there has actually been a land restitution process in place for almost 30 years. The land restitution process by 2026, has existed since 1994. And it involves the restoration of land rights to communities who lost their land due to dispossession in the previous century, thanks to the Native Land Act of 1913 that's often cited by South African politicians. The 1913 cutoff point was chosen to avoid land restitution being totally unworkable and borderline impossible. Effectively verifying land claims prior to 1913 is unfeasible due to highly unreliable records, differing tenure systems, and a lack of uniform national laws. Extending the restitution point beyond 1913 is further complicated by major population displacements caused by the Mfecane Wars of the 19th century. But this land restitution process that has been in place is actually a restitution process that AfriForum supports. AfriForum supports it because it is, one, evidence-based, and it is based on fair market-based compensation. If there is a land claim being made, someone's land that is currently occupying that land is not just going to be kicked off and that land is expropriated without compensation and redistributed. The current landowner is fairly compensated based on market value. And the person making the land claim has to actually present the evidence that they were dispossessed of that land. But this restitution process has been completely derailed by corruption and mismanagement. In 2009, the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform found that restitution claims were, in their words, plagued with corrupt officials, fraudulent and ghost claimants. An investigation by the Special Investigating Unit in 2019 revealed that fraud on, in their words, an enormous scale was taking place, where government officials handed out farms and millions in grants to beneficiaries who did not qualify. According to the Ministry of Land Reform and Rural Development, about 80,000 land claims were lodged by the 1998 deadline. And out of all these land claims, almost 90% of the successful land claimants chose money rather than the land itself. And this is a critical point in the land debate. If the ANC wants to create the narrative that there's just this hunger for land in South Africa, that claim is destroyed by the fact that when successful land claimants are given the option, they choose the monetary value of that land rather than the land itself. Almost 90% of them. Why is that? Because South Africans want upward mobility. They want a way of investing. They want a monetary foundation to build on. Not everyone is made to farm. Not everyone wants to farm. Not everyone sees their future in farming. South Africans want a way to ensure a better future for their children, or to start a business, or to invest that money. And an empty piece of land is not just going to start generating money. On the contrary, it's going to cost you money, because an empty piece of land needs to be developed. It needs to be made profitable, which is a very grueling process. According to a survey of 4,000 people conducted in the 1990s, only about 6% of respondents said they wanted to farm. That's less than 1 in 10. And the question was open. It was not, do you want to farm now? The question was, do you want to farm now or anywhere in the future? Only 6% said yes. According to Borman, by 2017, of all the land acquired by the government since the start of the land reform process, only about 6% has been transferred to private ownership. And that's how you end up with a government hoarding amount of land the size of Los Angeles that it acquired under the banner of land redistribution. Farming is not easy, as some politicians seem to think. Most of the South African government's land reform projects fail. And this is not based on statistics that you have to go dig on the dark web to find. It's based on statistics that they themselves publish. In 2020, the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development revealed that nearly 900 state-owned farms, covering approximately 700,000 hectares, were either underutilized or not used at all. Another example is that of Dawn Valley Farm that was purchased by the government in 2008 for a land reform project for about 12 million rand, and today there's no evidence that the farm is still productive in any way. The South African government has also spent over 1.4 billion rand on buying farms in the Eastern Cape for redistribution. But it was reported that of the 265 farms that were purchased, only 26 remain viable. In many of these cases, once thriving farms that produced food and employment now lie in ruin. And according to the government, at expense of 12 billion rand between 2006 and 2022, was spent on acquiring farms for land reform, but at a failure rate of 75%. When it comes to what is happening here, it's not that the South Africans that these farms are handed to can't farm. It is the fact that there are massive promises are made by the government of support and education and feed and seed and everything you need to farm. All these big promises are made. These farms, these land reform projects are handed out, and then the beneficiaries of these projects don't receive that support that was promised. It was just a political stunt. It was just so that the government can say, look, we are handing out pieces of land. But none of that support materialized. And you can't just place anyone on an empty piece of land and then they're going to make a success of it. You need a lot of investment, a lot of capital, a lot of machinery, and a lot of initial cash injection into an empty piece of land to actually make it profitable. But this is the symptom of a government that is not populated by farmers. It is a government populated by politicians that have no experience on what it actually takes to farm. But the threat to private property rights that originates from all these myths, all this misinformation, all of these false claims about land ownership has resulted in a real threat to private property rights. based on bad information. In December 2024, only announced in 2025, President Ramaphosa signed into law the Expropriation Act that many of you know, which enables the government to expropriate land without compensation, and not just land, any property, as the Expropriation Act states. But to understand the real threat to private property rights that this act holds, some context is needed, because we get a lot of rhetoric from the government that they respect private property rights, they would never expropriate land without compensation, or that they would never do it without good reason. But if you look at the context surrounding this act, the picture becomes clear. In 2018, President Ramaphosa announced that the ANC is now pursuing amending the South African Constitution to enable expropriation without compensation. Luckily, that first attempt failed, that attempt to abolish private property rights, because they couldn't get enough support in Parliament. But after it failed, AfriForum warned that this is only the first threat that has now been defeated. There will be more attempts by this government to erode private property rights. And AfriForum was correct, because very shortly after they failed to amend the Constitution, in 2021, the ANC announced through Minister of Justice Ronald Lamola at the time, and he stated, changing the Constitution was just one instrument we could have used. The matter is now ended. We will now use our simple majority to pass laws that will allow for expropriation without compensation. So what is Ronald Lamola saying here? He's saying, well, if one door closes, we will just kick open another one. We will expropriate land without compensation. We just need to find the right way to enable it. And when he was talking about we will now pass laws to make it possible, he was talking about the Expropriation Act. Ramaphosa echoed these sentiments when he stated in 2022 that, in his words, the ANC will implement its resolution on expropriation of land without compensation despite the refusal of other parties in Parliament. So he's just saying we're going ahead with it even if people object. And this expropriation bill was then gazetted in October 2020, and it was bulldozed through in 2024. Only announced in 2025, even though there was major opposition to it, and even though the president has since then admitted in his own court documents that it has major flaws, and that's part of the larger court case that AfriForum is part of. Another point that was made in the whole debate regarding the Expropriation Act was the fact that people said the nil compensation that was mentioned in the Act does not mean no compensation. But then you listen to what Deputy President Paul Mashatile says about how the ANC understands no compensation, and you realize it's exactly the same thing. Paul Mashatile, Deputy President, said in 2024 that no compensation means you don't pay. That's how he understands it. He said the difference between without compensation and no compensation is simply a word game. It's just wording. It means the same thing to him. And not just has the ANC made its desire very clear that it wants to expropriate land without compensation, this is the same party that still hails Robert Mugabe as a hero to this day. In 2025, President Ramaphosa praised Zimbabwean dictator Robert Mugabe's land policies as, in his words, ambitious and essential. The Mugabe regime's land policies of the early 2000s being referred to here involved chaotic and violent land seizures where white farmers were chased off their land, attacked, and some even murdered. Mugabe's fast-track land reform program, being praised as ambitious and essential by the current South African president, resulted in the collapse of the Zimbabwean agriculture sector and economy, mass starvation, and mass human rights violations. In 2025, more risks to private property rights in South Africa came to the fore when the MK party, the third largest party in South Africa, submitted a private members' bill for public comment proposing to abolish private property ownership in South Africa, and this bill seeks to amend Section 25 of the Constitution to make it that only the state is the sole custodian of land in South Africa. And this is where we are today, 2026. AfriForum is taking the Expropriation Act that has been mentioned to court. The court battle has already started. It started in March 2026 in the High Court in Cape Town, and it will continue in August 2026. 2026 is shaping up to be the start of the biggest battle to protect private property rights in South Africa in recent memory. Because if the Expropriation Act is not stopped, if it is not neutralized, if the threat to private property rights is not neutralized, the state will have the power to expropriate any property it wants, as long as it can justify that it is, quote unquote, in the public good, which is something that any politician can justify anything as, if you twist the statistics enough, as they have demonstrated they do. And in 2026, the ANC continues to say exactly what they mean when they say we will expropriate land without compensation. And they say exactly what they intend to do with the Expropriation Act. Earlier this year, ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula stated that the ANC intends to keep its promise to expropriate land without compensation, and he promised that the ANC will push for even more extreme land policies in the years going forward. But you can name all the problems with land reform in South Africa, with the Expropriation Act. You can clearly categorize or clearly describe all the threats. You also need to give an alternative, because the problems in South Africa when it comes to particularly unemployment, economic growth, all the problems of creating opportunities for people that are not being addressed need to have an answer. How do you solve these problems? Well, firstly, extremist policies like expropriation without compensation is not the answer. One does not fix a broken system with policies that will blow up the system. And an evidence-based restitution process already exists that AfriForum supports. An evidence-based restitution process based on fair market-based compensation that has existed for 30 years now, but that has been completely derailed by corruption and mismanagement. Fix that existing system. Don't grant the government more power to abuse people's constitutional rights. Thirdly, when land is redistributed, as has happened in limited capacity when it comes to land reform projects by the government, the adequate support needs to be given to those who receive that land. You can't just give someone an empty piece of land and expect them to make a success of it. And then lastly, honesty about the facts is absolutely critical. Politicians should refrain from spreading false claims and false statistics about land ownership in South Africa, especially racialized statistics. This inflames race relations and pushes the debate away from reasonable debate into the realm of extremist policies. And one of the claims at the center of this disinformation attack against private property rights in South Africa is the false claim, that 72% of land in South Africa is in the hands of the white minority, which is simply not true, as is demonstrated by the fact sheet that AfriForum has published today. This fact sheet will be available on AfriForum's website, but it will also be available here at this conference in physical form, and there will also be a link, if you're watching this as a video, there will be a link in the description to this full document as well. Lastly, the only way to ensure growth and job opportunities in South Africa is not to destroy private property rights, but to strengthen them. Every single case study across the world shows that those countries who protect private property rights successfully create the environment for investment, job creation, and economic growth, while those countries who destroy private property rights end up with human rights violations and with a destroyed agricultural sector and economy. And there are various reasons why, at this point, 2026, still quoting the 2017 land audit, there's no place for using these statistics in a rational conversation. On the one side, it's completely outdated. It's now more than 10 years later, or it's about just under 10 years later, and the statistics on the other side are deeply flawed as well. So not only are you using outdated statistics, you're using outdated, deeply flawed statistics if you are referring to the statistics within the land audit itself. Therefore, when it comes to AfriForum's suggestion for the future regarding the land debate, the issue of land firstly needs to be acknowledged as deeply complex and multidimensional. And in the interest of an honest discussion and sound policy making, and in the interest of improved race relations, AfriForum calls for a more balanced, evidence-based, and less racialized discourse regarding land in South Africa. We hope that this type of report or fact sheet that AfriForum publishes, alongside many of the other reports we've published over the years, can help in not only ensuring that the conversation remain fact-based, but that the end of the conversation is productive, that at the end of the debate, that the land debate actually has a productive outcome rather than a destructive one. And that is what AfriForum in our humble capacity try to achieve with the production of more of these types of fact sheets and reports on the real facts about land in South Africa. I would just like to conclude by thanking everyone for attending this conference. I look forward to the other speakers and the insights that they will provide regarding their own unique field of expertise as it contributes to this topic of land in South Africa. And then lastly, I would just like to encourage everyone, if you want to support AfriForum in our fight against expropriation without compensation, to visit the website www.onteiening.co.za. There will be a link on the screen and also on this document that you can follow to support us. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this conference. Thank you.